Good morning, everyone. This is Patrick at QAG, and welcome to today's webinar. It's great to have you here. Today, we're talking about a new technique. Yet again, another new webinar this year. We don't like to do repeats. Today, we're talking about version tracking, and we've talked about version tracking and locking and these techniques for keeping track of your history, your auditing of your documents before. But we've never talked about this new ability to show the difference between text in previous versions. And I guess I should probably ask you to raise your hands if you can hear me. I'm assuming the audio is coming through just fine. Thank you very much, Shane. That was quick. Yeah, so we've got quite a few things to talk about today, but the main focus is going to be on that new feature, the Diff text feature. I'll be talking about a few things here to begin with, kind of setting the stage for why this stuff is important. And then I'll be handing the mic and the presentation over to Pete Miller of Dynamic Compliance Systems, who's very happy to have with me today. He's one of our great customers. They've inspired a lot of features in the product over the years, and it's great to have him here. I'll switch to him in about 2 or 3 minutes, and then he'll go through and show a demo of this feature working in one of their forms. And then after he's done, I'm also happy to have one of our number one form designer here, Mel Clemente, is going to show how it was done in his form, in Peter's form. So that's kind of the overall agenda for today. So why version history? Well, you want to keep track of what changed. You want to see, it's auditing, obviously. You want to make sure that you can see the changes of the form, how it went through its workflow, make sure that you got sign off from everybody and when they signed off. So there's different kinds of version history. One is to just do it at the form level. You can do it out of box with SharePoint library versioning. Everyone can just turn that on. The downside is you've got to go into SharePoint to see it. It's hard to do reporting, if not impossible, and you don't have it. It's document level, so you don't have anything change tracking at a field level, for example. So the middle approach here is something that we've done in the past, which is also document level, and now we're doing the change history in the form. So instead of doing the SharePoint out-of-box versioning, we're going to do it in the form, and we add a separate section to your form that shows the history of everybody when they hit the button to approve it or submit it. We capture the date and time stamp of when they did that, and we store it in the form. And this is really good for form level auditing. You can see the changes in the form. You don't have to jump out of the form to go see them. The downside is, of course, it's still form level. It does increase the size of the XML, not a lot, depending if you're trying to store the entire XML in the form and look at the differences. Then we get larger. And once again, it's harder to do a lot of reporting on it because it's in the form and you have to get that data out to do the reporting on it. So the technique we're going to show today is this one of the third technique on the right here. And the technique of doing field level tracking in the form is advanced. Obviously, people sometimes want to see, we've got, sort of in between these two boxes, there's actually another approach, which is to do field level tracking in the form and not store it in a list. But today we're going to show you how to do field level tracking in the form that stores the data in a list. And this is great for showing, the changes between different areas in the form. It's a little more difficult to add, but we'll show this technique today. And the nice thing about this technique is that you can actually extend it and create yet another, over to the right version, which is storing the data in a database. So for large form processes where you've got a lot of data, a lot of changes, you can always move that data into the database as well. The list can kind of peter out around, or it can get overwhelmed maybe around 10 or 50K items, depending on where you're at with your SharePoint version. So that's form version tracking or version history, change tracking. We use the same term. You also need locking. So when you are opening a form, you don't want two people to open at the same time. The last one who saves it's going to win. The other person's updates are going to get overwritten. And that's not a great experience. So there's a couple of different ways to do locking. We have done a webinar on this before. In fact, you'll see one of these techniques in Peter's form today. But you can do check in, check out. Obviously, that's the simple way, manual. You go into SharePoint, you check it out, you open up the form, you make your changes, and then you make sure you check it back in again. Now, there are techniques that, to do the form, have the form do the checkout and the check-in. We have an XML template part, a section that you can add to your forms to automatically do that. But it's kind of unwieldy. It's hard to add to forms because the SharePoint API for automating that has some difficulties. It's not supported in 365, and I think it requires additional permissions, or there's something difficult about it. I forget what it is exactly, but it's hard to automate this, and you have to go back into SharePoint UI to see the changes. The other techniques are something on this middle box here, adding the form locks. This is document level, so you can actually add a list, kind of like we're doing with the change tracking, but you can add a list that keeps track of who's got the form open. So it's essentially a separate site asset that tracks who has the form open, and whenever someone else opens it, they get a little message saying, hey, so-and-so has the form open, you don't have access to edit it. So this is a nice technique that we've talked about in the past. We actually created an XTP for it a couple years ago. And it's a nice, but it's form level. So once again, this probably solves most of the scenarios out there today. But if you want multiple people to be able to open the form at the same time and make changes and make sure those edits are written correctly without overwrites, then it's more work. And that's what we're going to show today. This last box here. So with that, I would like to introduce Pete Miller again. Pete, it's great to have you here. I'm going to make you the presenter. We've been working with you now for several years, and really I want to thank you again for being the inspiration behind a lot of these new features. We're going to see a couple new features today in your demo, one of which I haven't talked about, which is the cell phone authentication, even though we've done a webinar on it in the past. And I want to welcome you, and thanks for agreeing to do our showcase today.
It's my pleasure. Let me see if I can get this working on the right screen first. I'm not sure. Oh, that's the right one. So you should be seeing now the slide with my face on. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me, and in terms of us being the inspiration, had it not been for your highly capable team there, some of these things that we dream up would certainly not be possible. But what we've done is we've actually taken a business function, which is very common in the regulated industry. It has to do specifically with pharmaceutical and medical device companies, and it has to do with what are called quality agreements. So you can think about it like any other type of agreement if you're not familiar with the regulated industry, but you'll see in a lot of these slides that basically there are terms and conditions. In this case, we've separated those to align with what FDA's guidance is, which is a published document that identifies certain things that should be in a good quality agreement. So they provided some structure, which was really helpful in kind of getting the whole idea of coming up with a tool off the ground. Having something that the regulatory agencies sort of subscribe to. And what we've done with that is took that structure, utilized the web forms that are available through Forms Viewer to really address the problems that we were seeing in the industry, which primarily were that people are really kind of getting overwhelmed with these quality agreements. And by and large, that comes from one of two things. It's either they have too many people who are involved in the quality agreements, or they have too few, right? So too many people is you've got just a menagerie of different agreements out there and no kind of commonality, no common structure, and no common process. Or you have too few, and those are the people who are really kind of overwhelmed with what has to go on in the context of the quality agreement process, right? So that typically what you're seeing here is the organization has to go through a collaboration process. And that's where a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is really helpful, because now you can collaborate using some of the best ideas that are out there for like a Google Docs collaboration, by having outside parties actually come into your form and everybody's working on the same form. So that reduces the issue around collecting all that information that comes from the outside and then having to put it into one common document and then redistribute it. So there's that iterative process that everybody goes through to create these agreements. And what we're seeing in front of us here is just one of the sections of the document where we have the outlined responsibilities between the two parties, very typical sort of agreement structure. And you can also see just a little bit in the top here is where other tabs exist that follow that structure. Now, one of the keys to getting people to collaborate was what Patrick mentioned a minute ago, which is this ability to let people get into the document from the outside. And what you see here is sort of a sequence that goes on from left to right here. They get an email notification, they click on the link that's there that allows them to authenticate into the system using a free app that they can download from Twilio onto their phone. And Patrick mentioned this. This is a really helpful, I think, game-changing technology, which we have struggled with authenticating people to the systems because underlying is, the SharePoint structure. But this is really a game-changing capability in terms of the ability to get people from the outside to authenticate easily into your system using a third-party app, right? So it's really a no-brainer if you can implement this sort of a solution. Then going forward from that, you have this iterative process I talked about where you're making changes or your partner is making changes. And what we've done with this form, you can see here, we have a highlight of the things that have been changed. And so this is the key to sort of today's demo, right, where we've got a change and the change is highlighted, but now you kind of want to take that one step further in order to make it, again, easier for the participants. What you really have to do is let them know what has changed. So you can see in the history here, when I click on, I'll go back for a second, there's a little button here on the side which gives you access to the changes that have occurred within this particular section. And now you can see the details of that. So at this time, this person went in, which was me, and put a new bullet here. And then you can see subsequently my alter ego got in here and put in a comment, in essence, that said they're not really crazy and they were suggesting some other language. But the point is that it's all done in one place. And if I had simple edits, like I just wanted to bold something or I just wanted to make some minor changes in terms of the content, I could do all that here, and then the other parties would know exactly what was changed. So this is the really another game-changing capability that's now available to us in the form. And this is very, very helpful to the folks who are utilizing this tool to formulate their agreements. They're collaborating online just like you would do in like a Microsoft Word environment. You're able to basically track the changes that are made. Now, some of the other capabilities that we've done with the form to make it fully capable, you can see here that it does have the ability to add sections and add new parts and remove parts and move those parts up and down. So all those functions which you would think about in terms of the normal process for performing an agreement, that collaboration around an agreement, this is what you're seeing here. So I think what makes sense now, Patrick, is just to kind of demonstrate some of this capability. So I'm going to switch over to the actual page, and hopefully this is not too small for people to see, but what you're seeing here is the SharePoint library where we maintain all these agreements. So the data that is here is information that's put into the form and then pushed back to this library. And of course, you can edit, modify, change this information to be appropriate to your purpose. In our case, this is pretty straightforward, where we have an owner of the document and a contract facility, and we indicate who is doing what role in terms of this particular agreement. So without getting into those details, I'll just go into the document and you kind of see how that functions. This particular document I only set up a little bit earlier today so that we could see, some of the changes that I've already made. So, and then we'll go ahead and make a change. So you can see the tabs here in the various sections that align with the FDA's guidance. And then I'm just going to choose one of those sections, and you can already see here that this has an asterisk on it, which indicates that it's been changed. And you can see here that this second one has an asterisk on it. And just to kind of keep the initial example simple, you can see exactly who changed this and when, right? So you can see that this change was made by this person at this date and time, and then subsequently, this person went in and made a subsequent minor change to that, which ultimately is the version that you're looking at right now, right? So what we do with our history here is we show the current, and then we allow the history in this case to show what has transpired before. So you can see this was the bullet after the initial change, and where this green highlight down here is what was added. The little pink dots, if you can see those, the pink highlights are things that were removed, as in this case extra spaces. And then even though this particular person went in and just made an addition, what we would refer to as sort of a comment, that gets captured as an add. And in this case, they put it in red text. That's why it looks different. So when we actually go back now and look at the document, that's actually in red text. So what we'll do from here is we'll actually switch into the edit mode and take that person's suggestion and say, okay, what they would like is I change this, instead of saying new bullet here, they want to say I'd like a new bullet here, and so we're just going to erase this and take off the quotes, and then we'll save it. And so I'm done editing that, and I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to hit save, and that's the end of my editing of that document. And what probably makes the most sense at this point is that's closed and put away. And what I'm going to do is go back over to one of the examples where I sent this for review. And so I'm just going to use the same notification that I sent before, so you can sort of see this in action. And I'm going to pull my phone onto the screen here so you can actually see. This is a representation of my phone. Because of security that gets put on the phone, you can't actually put your phone on the screen. It won't allow it. So I'm going to click here and say, yes, let me into the form. And what you're going to see is it's going to go to that authentication screen you saw in the slide, and it's going to force me to authenticate. And if you heard that, that was my phone going off, my actual phone going off. And now I'm going to go into our Authy tool. I'm going to take this code, which has been pushed to me, and I'm going to put that in here, and then I'm going to verify Pete number 2, Miller number 2, which is my alter ego for this. And I'm going to come down to that item that we looked at before, and you can see that's the current version. It's highlighting the fact that it's been changed, and we can go look at that content, and you can see exactly what's happened. Now, the red, as I mentioned, is the delete. You can see what was deleted exactly, and that was done by me as opposed to the person who's logged in right now. And that is the extent of how that works. I think, you know, Patrick, that covers off the points that we wanted to make. You can still go and edit this further if you wanted to, but in essence, you know, we've covered all the functions that we wanted to talk about today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. I'm going to switch to Mel, and she's going to tell us how she did what you just saw there. Mel, you have the floor.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Pete. So great, you know, the feeling that, you know, having been involved in all the most of the development work in this form just makes me so happy and proud that you're liking the solution we've built for you. So yeah, let me show you how we're doing those behind the scenes, mainly focusing on the history, I guess. So what's responsible for, let me get this out of the way, and okay, sorry. So the history section appears as soon as Pete clicks on the HX button there. So all the rules that displays the version history is in this button. So we first set the focus row, just telling the form which row to show, because as we know, or maybe not, these are those parts that Pete showed were part of a repeating structure. So we've got a normalized schema here. We've got the section, subsection, further down. We even have sub-2 sections. So those are what gets added in the form when the user clicks on one of these buttons here. And so down to the part, which is actually where we are like tracking the change history for. Okay, so then if we look at the button again, we can't get that GoToWebinar pane out of my way, but okay. And then we get the history. So Patrick was telling you that we are storing the history in a list, actually. So that's what we're querying. So we basically have this SharePoint list data connection called parts version history. And so before we query that, we filter based on what QAG number this form is for and which part do we want to see the history of. And then we query the list, and then we run the actual command. And before we do, we just sort of set one of the dummy, like pick a dummy column in the parts version history where we can run some rules and basically just set, what I'm doing here is I'm setting the row number so that I know which row I'm checking to see the difference, right? And then we run the actual command. Let me show you the list first, I guess. So let me go here, and in the Forms Designer, by the way, is where you can see all the QRules command there. And this is a brand new command that we just added in our recent release. And I'm not sure when we're going to actually release that, but here are all the guidance text as far as the parameters go, like what you need to in order to build your command there. So if I go back to the site and show you the parts version history, which I should have gotten ready here, so please bear with me. Okay. So here is our list, and we're grouping this by QAG numbers. And it's taking a little time to load because there are a lot of history now. We've got like 115 parts per form and got a couple QAGs in the system now. So, okay, here we go. So let's look at Pete's QAG, the one that he was just showing you. So here we are storing each of those changes. And as you can see here, these were all his changes. All right, so now we're just basically querying this list and returning them into the form with the added styling as like similar to the words track version or track change feature, right? And what we did here is we needed to add a dummy column. I'm calling it diff. This is actually empty. If you can see here, it has no value. I just need some helper column in there that I can bring into my forms data source so that I can show the differences in that column. So here's that diff column. It's just the rich text column that I then have in my form as in that parts version history SharePoint list data connection. I've checked that column so that I can bring it here. All right, so then I have that, but again, it's not storing anything. All right, let me show you what this version does, because if you can remember, I'm setting this to the value set when I try to click on the HX button. So when the version's value is set, I'm just setting ID to be the count of the following sibling, meaning what is its position in that row based on the following sibling, which will start from 0, okay? And so here is the command that we're using. So diff rich text is the name of the command. You specify the DS name because I'm calling it, or I'm trying to do differentiating from a secondary data source. So I specify my data connection name there, parent path, and again, you're going to see all these guidance text in the Forms Viewer Designer page. But the parent path is going to be your repeating group here, with the addition that it's not going to be the last row. I'm not. I can't remember exactly the technicalities behind that. Jimmy, you would know, but yeah, this is your format. And then before would be the, actually it's a previous, because the command compares two field values and returns it in another field. So this is their destination, and this is the before XPath where it's going to check for the previous value, versus the after XPath is where it's going to check for the current value. So you just specify those XPaths and the corresponding parameters. If you want to add the styling, which you would, because you want to show red highlights if something is removed, and green if something is added, and all that. And then implementation, you have two options to either implement it using the DF over DX, and there's TNWINC. More on that in those links that we provide. I'm not really sure what the difference is yet, but the default is DF over DX, and based just from experience, you get more information as far as what changed if you use this default one. So then once you're calling that command, you just simply, my next step here is showing my overlay, which shows you the cool pop-up like in your info path form, and this is the section that gets displayed. So it's just one teeny section there, just has some formatting. This is actually the rich text field that is displayed in a calculated value. So here it's pointing to the diff dummy column that I added in my list, and that's basically it. It's showing you the formatted columm, formatted, yeah.
That's great. How long did it take you to add it to their form?
I guess just trying to understand where I should put things, right? But you know, without that, it should be 1 hour or so.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful demo. And I'm just going to switch back. I know we're running a little bit over, and I want to kind of close out the webinar here and give you a chance to ask questions. If you have questions for Mel or Pete or me, there's a question and answer section here moments away. So go ahead and throw those questions in for us. We'd love to know that you're still listening to us. I just wanted, DCS has done a lot of solutions out there. Here's a list of some of these of your customers here, and we're really happy that you're hopefully going to add to this list with this new feature. Mel, great job showing how to do this and doing this. We are working in this tool called FormZero, which is currently the only app out there that supports InfoPath design as is. We are working very hard to add the designer capabilities, the canvas capability that you saw in the InfoPath designer that Mel had open to FormZero this year. We've been speccing and writing code, and we are hoping to get a prototype out in the next release in a month or two for all of you to look at and start using. We are going to use a click and insert model, and we'll have the ability to, it'll look very similar. We're going to try to maintain the current training you have and familiarity you have with the InfoPath designer. So it'll be it'll resemble the current design experience, but it will be in the browser. It will be outside of InfoPath designer. We know from Microsoft that the support for InfoPath designer will be continuing until April of 2026. We're not sure how long the cloud support will continue. I'm guessing a couple more years. They've said 2 to 3 years. Don't worry. The concern is that today you can't use the InfoPath designer for modern UI libraries. We can publish actually to them, but I think there's some limitations around modern UI, and FormZero doesn't have those limitations. So if you're in FormZero, you don't have that problem. But we're very sensitive to something breaking down the road as Microsoft moves further and further away from InfoPath and SharePoint Designer. So we're working hard to try to get that done. We have new features. We like the feature you just saw, the different rich text feature. We're adding new features for PDF pagination this week, adding footer controls. You can have page numbers in your footer. We hope to be doing a webinar on that in a week or two. And best feature of all, though, is you get us to support you. So without any more advertisement, I would like to ask you if you've got any questions whatsoever for us. This was quite a deep dive today using some advanced techniques. But yeah, if you've got any questions whatsoever on what you saw, now is your time to ask us. And if not, we'll bid you adieu, and you guys can go back to your great day there. Hopefully the heat isn't too oppressive where you're at. I know that we're in a heat wave here in the U.S., not in Seattle so much, but looks like we don't have any questions. I want to thank Pete and Mel again for being here today. It's been a great webinar. You can find us on all of the normal social media places. We are going to post this to YouTube in an hour or two. We've got the recording going, and there's a very short 4-question survey at the end. We'll send you a sample form. It won't be DCS's QAG Manager form that's quite involved, but we'll send you the sample form for this technique along with the presentation, and look forward to having you here again in a week or two. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Pete.